Sterile millionaire weeps over childlessness until he sees a mother with triplet babies begging for food, and a miracle happens before anything else. If this video finds you well, wherever you are, let me know how it made you feel at the end turn. The marble floors of Blackwood Enterprises gleamed under the afternoon sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Nathaniel Blackwood's Italian leather shoes echoed through the corridors of his financial empire, each step a reminder of the success that had consumed 38 years of his life. His corner office overlooked Manhattan's bustling streets, walls adorned with awards and photographs of handshakes with powerful men. Yet today, none of it mattered. The medical report lay open on his mahogany desk, its clinical words burning into his memory. Permanent infertility due to complications from vehicular trauma, 5 years. 5 years since that rainy night when a drunk driver had changed everything. The physical injuries had healed, but the invisible wounds ran deeper than any surgeon could reach. Nathaniel loosened his silk tie and walked to the window. 52 floors below, Central Park sprawled like a green oasis. Children played on the playground, their distant laughter carried by the wind. A father pushed his daughter on a swing while a mother chased twin boys across the grass. "Mr. Blackwood?" His secretary's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your car is ready." "Cancel it," he replied, his voice hoarse. "I'll walk today." As the sun set over the city he had conquered, Nathaniel Blackwood, the man who could buy anything, stood alone with the one thing money couldn't purchase, the family he'd always dreamed of having. But sometimes, when we stop looking for what we want most, life has a way of placing it right in front of us. That evening, as Nathaniel stepped onto the sidewalk outside an exclusive restaurant, he had no idea that his entire world was about to change with 3 little words. "Please, sir, help." The crisp November evening air bit at Nathaniel's face as he walked the familiar streets of Manhattan. For once, he wasn't rushing to another meeting or dinner appointment. Tonight he simply needed to think. The sidewalk outside Romano's, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, buzzed with well-dressed patrons waiting for their tables. Nathaniel barely noticed them until a soft, desperate voice cut through. The urban noise. "Please, sir, help." He turned toward the sound and froze. Huddled against the restaurant's brick wall sat a young woman so thin her coat hung like a tent around her frame. Dark circles shadowed her eyes and her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. But it wasn't her appearance that stopped Nathaniel cold. It was the 3 identical little boys pressed against her side. The triplets couldn't have been older than 5, their small faces gaunt with hunger. One rubbed his eyes with tiny fists, while another clutched a tattered stuffed dinosaur. The third, the smallest, looked up at Nathaniel with startling blue eyes that seemed far too wise for his age. "Mama, I'm hungry," the boy with the dinosaur whispered. The woman's cheeks flushed red. "I know, Ethan. Soon, baby." Something twisted in Nathaniel's chest. He'd walked past countless homeless people in his life, always too busy, always assuming someone else would help. But these children, their innocent faces reminded him of something he couldn't quite place. "When did you last eat?" he found himself asking. The woman looked up, startled. Fear flickered across her features. "We're fine, thank you." "No, you're not." Nathaniel knelt down, making himself less intimidating. "I'm Nathaniel. What are your names?" "I'm Oliver," said the boy with bright eyes. "That's Ethan and Charlie. And you?" Nathaniel looked at their mother. She hesitated. "Caroline. Caroline Foster." The name stirred something in his memory, but he pushed it aside. "There's a place nearby that serves the best mac and cheese in the city. What do you say we get these boys fed?" Caroline's eyes filled with tears. Pride warred with desperation on her face as her sons looked up at her with hope. "Mama, please," Charlie whispered. That single word shattered her resolve. "Okay," she breathed. "Just this once." Nathaniel's penthouse apartment had never felt more alive. The triplets sat around his dining table, their eyes wide with wonder at the feast Margaret, his longtime housekeeper, had quickly prepared. Plates of mac and cheese, grilled chicken, and fresh fruit disappeared faster than he'd ever seen food vanish. Slow down, boys, Caroline whispered, embarrassed by their urgency. But Nathaniel watched, mesmerized. There was something hauntingly familiar about the way Oliver tilted his head when thinking, identical to a habit Nathaniel had noticed in himself during board meetings. Ethan's laugh, a bright, infectious sound, stirred memories he couldn't quite grasp. And Charlie, the quietest of the three, had the same thoughtful way of observing everything before speaking. "How old are you boys?" Nathaniel asked gently. "5, they answered in unison, then giggled at their synchronized response. "Almost 6, Oliver added proudly. "Our birthday's next month, right before Christmas." Nathaniel's chest tightened. December. 6 years ago this December he'd been. Where, exactly? The memory felt important but remained frustratingly out of reach. Caroline barely touched her food, instead discreetly wrapping portions in napkins when she thought no one was looking. Nathaniel pretended not to notice, but his heart ached at her quiet sacrifice. "Mrs. Foster," he said softly, "when did you last have a real meal?" She looked up, startled. "Please call me Caroline, and I eat enough." "No, you don't." The words came out more firmly than he intended. "When did you last sleep in a real bed?" Tears welled in her eyes. "We've been traveling. I'm trying to get to my sister in Boston. Sarah said she'd help us get back on our feet." "Where did you come from?" "Philadelphia. The shelter where we were staying closed down suddenly. We've been on the road for 3 days. As the boys finished eating, exhaustion overtook them. They curled up together on Nathaniel's leather sofa, 3 small bodies finding comfort in each other's warmth. "They're beautiful children," Nathaniel said, studying their peaceful faces. "They're everything to me," Caroline whispered. "Their father. He doesn't know about them. I never got the chance to tell him." Something in her voice made Nathaniel look at her more carefully. Even through the exhaustion and hunger, there was something familiar about her features, her voice, the way she moved. "Caroline," he said slowly, "have we met before?" Fear flashed across her face so quickly he almost missed it. "No," she said too quickly. "I'm sure I'd remember meeting someone like you." But as she turned away, Nathaniel caught something in her expression, a recognition she was desperately trying to hide. Sleep eluded Nathaniel that night. In the guest bedroom down the hall, Caroline and the boys rested peacefully for the first time in days. But something about Caroline's reaction to his question gnawed at him relentlessly. He sat in his study, laptop open, scrolling through old photo albums he rarely looked at anymore. Years of charity galas, business events, and social gatherings blurred together until he reached December 2018. There, at the Children's Hospital benefit dinner, Nathaniel stopped breathing. In the photograph, he stood smiling beside a radiant young woman with flowing blonde hair and bright eyes. She wore a simple black dress that couldn't hide her natural beauty, and her laugh seemed to light up the entire frame. The caption read, "Nathaniel Blackwood with volunteer Caroline Mitchell." Caroline Mitchell. Not Foster. Mitchell. The memories came flooding back like a dam bursting. She'd been an art student working part-time as a server at the gala. They'd talked for hours about her paintings, her dreams of teaching children. He'd been captivated by her passion, her genuine warmth in a world full of artificial smiles. They'd spent 3 incredible weeks together. Long dinners, walks through Central Park, nights talking until sunrise. She'd shown him a side of life he'd forgotten existed. Simple joy, honest laughter, the beauty in everyday moments. Then one morning, she was simply gone. No note, no explanation. Her phone was disconnected, her apartment empty. He'd hired investigators, but Caroline Mitchell had vanished as if she'd never existed. Now she sat in his guest room, gaunt and desperate, using a different last name. Nathaniel's hands shook as he calculated the timeline. The boys were 5, almost 6. Born in December. If Caroline had been pregnant when she disappeared. He walked to his balcony, the city lights blurring through sudden tears. 6 years. 6 years of wondering what happened to her. 6 years of believing she'd simply chosen to leave him. But what if she hadn't left by choice? Oliver's thoughtful expressions, Ethan's infectious laugh, Charlie's quiet observation of everything around him, the familiar blue eyes that had stopped him cold on the sidewalk, his sons. The possibility hit him like a physical blow. Those 3 beautiful, hungry children sleeping in his guest room might be his sons, the family he'd believed he could never have. But why had Caroline disappeared? And why was she so afraid for him to recognize her now? As dawn approached, Nathaniel made a decision. Tomorrow he would ask her directly. Whatever the truth was, whatever had happened 6 years ago, those children deserved better than sleeping on sidewalks. And if they were truly his sons, nothing in heaven or earth would separate them again. Nathaniel found Charlie awake at dawn, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sunrise paint Manhattan in golden hues. The little boy turned when he heard footsteps, his blue eyes, so remarkably similar to Nathaniel's own, bright with curiosity. "The city looks different from up here," Charlie said softly. "Like a toy kingdom." "It does, doesn't it?" Nathaniel knelt beside him. "Do you like it here, Charlie?" The boy nodded solemnly. "Mama slept all night. She hasn't done that in a long time." He paused, then added with innocent honesty, "We don't have a daddy. Mama says he lives far away and doesn't know about us." The words hit Nathaniel like a physical blow, but he kept his voice gentle. "When's your birthday, buddy?" "December 18th. Mama says we're Christmas miracles." Charlie smiled. "Do you have kids?" "No," Nathaniel whispered, his throat tight. "But I'd like to someday." By the time Caroline emerged from the guest room, Margaret had prepared a feast of pancakes, fresh fruit, and hot chocolate. The boys attacked their food with slightly less desperation than the night before, and Caroline actually managed to eat a full plate. "You look better," Nathaniel observed as Oliver and Ethan explored his home office aquarium. "I feel human again." Caroline's smile was genuine but cautious. "Thank you for everything. We should leave this morning." "Caroline." Nathaniel pulled out his phone, showing her the photograph from 6 years ago. "We need to talk." Her coffee cup clattered against the saucer, her face draining of all color. The transformation was instant and devastating. The woman who'd been relaxing moments before became a cornered animal ready to flee. "I don't know what you think." "Caroline Mitchell," he said quietly. "Art student. Worked part-time catering. December 2018. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Please, you don't understand." "Then help me understand." Nathaniel moved closer, his voice gentle but urgent. "You disappeared without a word. I looked everywhere for you. I thought you just decided I wasn't worth staying for." "No!" The word exploded from her. "It wasn't like that. I wanted to stay. I wanted—" She glanced toward the boys, lowering her voice. "Your mother found me." "My mother? Eleanor Blackwood. She came to my apartment with lawyers and threats. Said I was a gold digger trying to trap her son. She offered me money to disappear and promised to destroy my life if I ever tried to contact you again." Nathaniel's blood turned to ice. "What else?" "I left that night. I was terrified. Then 3 weeks later I discovered I was pregnant." Caroline's voice broke. "I wanted to call you, but I was so scared of what she might do. To me, to them." The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. His mother's disapproval of anyone she deemed beneath the Blackwood name, her manipulative control over every aspect of his life. "Those boys," Nathaniel whispered, "they're mine." Caroline nodded, tears flowing freely. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You missed their whole lives. But I was protecting them, protecting you from her." For 6 years his own mother had stolen his children from him, and now finally his family was home. The Westchester Country Club's dining room buzzed with the refined chatter of Manhattan's elite. Eleanor Blackwood sat at her usual corner table, cutting her salmon with surgical precision. At 72, she remained formidable. Silver hair perfectly coiffed, designer suit impeccable, cold blue eyes that had intimidated business rivals. For decades. She looked up to find her son approaching, his face a mask of controlled fury she'd never seen before. "Nathaniel, darling, you look terrible. Are you ill?" She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "6 years, Mother." He remained standing, his voice low but carrying an edge that made nearby diners glance over. "For 6 years, you let me believe I'd never have a family." Eleanor's fork paused midway to her mouth. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Caroline Mitchell? Ring any bells? The color drained from Eleanor's face, but her composure never wavered. "Ah, the little gold digger finally surfaced, did she? She had my children, Mother. 3 sons, your grandsons." Each word dropped like a stone. "They've been homeless, hungry, living in shelters while you played God with my life." Eleanor set down her fork carefully. "Children?" For the first time, genuine surprise flickered across her features. "She never mentioned children. Because you terrified her into silence." Nathaniel's voice rose, drawing stares from other tables. "She was pregnant when you forced her to disappear." "I protected you," Eleanor hissed, her mask finally slipping. "That girl was beneath our family's station, a nobody trying to trap you with her feminine wiles. She was the woman I loved. And those boys, my sons, have spent 6 years believing their father abandoned them." Eleanor's mind raced, calculating children changed everything. Blackwood heirs. "Where are they now?" "Safe. And as far from you as I can manage." Nathaniel leaned forward, his voice deadly quiet. "Here's what's going to happen. You will stay away from them. You will never contact Caroline again. And you will sign over your shares in the company to me. You can't be serious. Try me." Nathaniel straightened his jacket. "Because if you don't, I'll make sure every society page in the city knows how Eleanor Blackwood destroyed her own family out of petty snobbery." For the first time in decades, Eleanor Blackwood found herself speechless. "Think carefully, Mother. Those boys don't know they have a grandmother yet. Whether they ever do depends entirely on your next choice." He turned and walked away, leaving Eleanor alone with her untouched meal and the wreckage of her carefully constructed world. Meanwhile, back at the penthouse, Margaret hummed as she helped the boys with a puzzle, already researching the best private schools in the city. She'd watched Nathaniel build his empire, but she'd never seen him truly happy until this morning. "Mr. Nathaniel's going to take care of you boys," she told them with absolute certainty. And for the first time in 6 years, someone finally would. 3 weeks transformed everything. The guest apartment 2 floors down from Nathaniel's penthouse became a real home, filled with laughter, scattered toys, and the wonderful chaos of family life. Caroline stood in the art studio Nathaniel had quietly arranged for her, sunlight streaming through tall windows as she worked on her first painting in years. Her hands, once steady only from desperation, now moved with renewed confidence across the canvas. The hollow look had left her eyes, replaced by something Nathaniel hadn't seen since that magical December 6 years ago. Hope. "Daddy, look what I made." Oliver burst through the door holding a clay dinosaur that looked more like a lumpy potato. The word daddy still took Nathaniel's breath away. 3 weeks, and the boys had accepted him so naturally as if they'd been waiting their whole lives for him to appear. "That's incredible, buddy. Is it a T-Rex?" "It's a triceratops." Oliver giggled. "Charlie made one too, but his looks better." Nathaniel found Charlie in the living room, quietly reading a book about space while Ethan built an elaborate tower with blocks. Margaret sat nearby, knitting what looked suspiciously like tiny sweaters. "How's the book, Charlie?" "Did you know there are billions of stars we can't even see?" Charlie looked up with those thoughtful blue eyes. "Maybe our real dad is looking at the same stars somewhere." The innocent words pierced Nathaniel's heart. He knelt beside his youngest son. "By 3 minutes, Caroline had explained with a smile. "Charlie, what if I told you that your real dad has been looking for you for a very long time? And what if he found you?" Charlie studied his face with that serious expression. "Would he want to stay?" forever and always. That evening, as Caroline tucked the boys into their beds in the guest apartment, Nathaniel watched from the doorway. She sang softly, a lullaby he'd never heard but somehow felt in his bones. "They love you," she said as they walked to the living room. "I love them too, more than I thought possible." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Caroline, I want to make this official. DNA tests, legal documentation. I want to adopt them properly." Fear flickered across her face. "What if Eleanor tries something?" "She won't. I made sure of that." He took her hands gently. "But even if she did, nothing will separate us again. I promise." Later that night, Nathaniel stood on his balcony, phone pressed to his ear as his best friend and lawyer, Thomas Reed, ran through the legal procedures. "DNA tests are routine," Thomas was saying. "Given the timeline and the boy's resemblance, to you it's really just a formality. But Nathaniel, are you sure you're ready for this? Instant fatherhood is a big leap." Nathaniel watched the lights twinkle in the apartment below, where his sons slept safely for the first time in their lives. "Thomas, I've been ready for this my whole life. I just didn't know it yet." In the guest apartment, Caroline stood by the window, watching the same city lights. For 6 years, she'd carried the weight of protecting her boys alone. Now, finally, she could share that burden with the man she'd never stopped loving. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, they were simply a family, learning to be together. December 18th arrived with the first snow of winter, covering Central Park in pristine white. Nathaniel had initially planned an elaborate party, a private room at the plaza, professional entertainers, enough decorations to rival Times Square. But Caroline had gently intervened. "They've never had a real birthday party," she'd explained. "Something simple would mean more to them than anything extravagant." So instead of gilded ballrooms, they found themselves in a cozy pavilion in Central Park, where Margaret had helped arrange a modest celebration. Red and blue balloons danced in the winter breeze, and a small group of children from the boys' new school ran around the snowy playground. 6 years old, Nathaniel murmured, watching his sons blow out candles on a homemade chocolate cake. "I can't believe I missed 5 birthdays." "You're here for this one," Caroline said softly, her hand finding his. "That's what matters." Oliver immediately dove into his slice of cake, getting frosting on his nose. Ethan carefully saved the corner piece with the most roses for later. Charlie sat quietly, watching everything with that thoughtful expression that reminded Nathaniel so much of himself at that age. "Make a wish, Charlie," urged one of his new classmates. "I already got my wish," Charlie said simply, looking between Nathaniel and Caroline. "My daddy came home." Thomas Reed, who'd been quietly observing from a nearby bench, approached Nathaniel during a lull in the festivities. "They're remarkable boys," Thomas said, watching Ethan help a younger child tie his shoes. "The way they've adapted, the way they care for each other. Caroline did an extraordinary job raising them alone." "I know." Nathaniel's voice was thick with emotion. "I just wish—" "You can't change the past," Thomas interrupted gently. "But you can secure their future. Have you thought about making this arrangement more permanent?" "What do you mean?" "DNA tests will confirm what we all already know, but beyond legal paternity. Have you considered what happens if something occurs to you? Or to Caroline? These boys need stability, legal protection." Nathaniel watched Caroline laughing as Oliver tried to build a snowman with mittens too big for his hands. She looked healthy now, radiant even, but the memory of finding her gaunt and desperate on that sidewalk still haunted him. "What are you suggesting?" "Marriage provides the strongest legal foundation for blended families. It ensures Caroline has full parental rights, and it protects the boys if anything happens to either of you." The word marriage sent an unexpected warmth through Nathaniel's chest. Not because of legal necessities, but because watching Caroline, with their sons, seeing her paint again, hearing her laugh. "Uncle Thomas brought presents," Ethan announced, tugging the lawyer toward the gift table. As the afternoon wound down and the other families headed home, Nathaniel found himself alone, With his immediate family for the first time since that night on the sidewalk, the boys played in the snow while Caroline packed leftover cake. "Caroline," he said quietly, "would you consider staying permanently? Not just until you get back on your feet, but forever?" She looked up, snowflakes catching in her blonde hair. "What are you asking?" "I'm asking if you'd build a life with me, a real life for them, for us." Before she could answer, Charlie ran over, his cheeks red from cold and excitement. "This was the best birthday ever," he declared, hugging both of them simultaneously. Looking at her son's joy, Caroline knew her answer. Eleanor Blackwood had spent 3 weeks in calculated silence, watching from the shadows as her son played house with his newfound family. She'd hired private investigators, studied Caroline's background, and discovered the truth that changed everything. Those children carried Blackwood blood. The morning of December 20th, while Nathaniel attended an emergency board meeting he couldn't postpone, Eleanor made her move. Caroline was helping the boys with art projects when the doorman's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mrs. Foster, there's an Eleanor Blackwood here to see you. She says it's urgent family business." Caroline's blood turned to ice. The paintbrush slipped from her fingers, leaving a streak of blue across the canvas. "Mama, who is it?" Oliver looked up from his drawing of dinosaurs. Just someone Daddy knows, sweetheart. Keep painting." When the elevator doors opened, Eleanor stepped out like a queen entering her domain. At 72, she remained formidable in her tailored coat and pearls. Behind her stood 2 men in expensive suits. Lawyers, Caroline realized with growing dread. "Miss Mitchell." Eleanor's voice cut through the apartment's warmth like winter wind. "Or should I say, Miss Foster, you seem to collect names as easily as you collect my family's sympathy. Mrs. Blackwood." Caroline positioned herself between Eleanor and the boys. "Nathaniel isn't here. I'm not here for my son. I'm here for you." Eleanor's gaze moved to the triplets who'd stopped their art projects to stare at the intimidating woman. "And for them. Boys, why don't you go to your room and play with your new birthday toys?" Caroline's voice remained steady despite her racing heart. Once they'd reluctantly obeyed, Eleanor settled into Nathaniel's expensive sofa as if she owned it. "Lovely children. They have the Blackwood eyes, don't they? What do you want?" Eleanor opened her purse and withdrew a check, placing it carefully on the coffee table. $2 million, more than you could spend in several lifetimes. Caroline didn't even glance at the number. "I'm not for sale. Everything is for sale. My dear, the question is simply the price." Eleanor's smile was razor sharp. "Take the money, disappear again, raise my grandson somewhere far from here, and never contact Nathaniel again." "They're his sons too." "Are they?" Eleanor leaned forward. "Because according to my lawyers, you have no legal proof of paternity. You never filed for support, never established legal fatherhood. In the eyes of the law, you're simply a clever woman with a compelling story." The threat landed like a physical blow. "Nathaniel knows the truth. Nathaniel thinks he knows the truth. But what happens when I convince him you're nothing but an opportunist who saw his vulnerability and exploited it? What happens when I produce witnesses who will testify that you researched him before that convenient meeting on the sidewalk?" Caroline's hands shook. "You can't do that. I can do anything I want. I have resources you can't imagine." Eleanor stood, towering over Caroline. "But I'm offering you a choice. Take the money and give those boys a comfortable life somewhere else, or stay and watch me destroy you in court. Fight me, and you'll lose everything, including them." From the bedroom came the sound of the boys playing, their innocent laughter, a stark contrast to the venom filling the living room. "I won't let you take them from their father again." Eleanor's expression hardened. "Then you'll lose them anyway. Only this time you'll have nothing." She walked toward the elevator, her lawyers following like silent shadows. "You have 24 hours to decide. After that, my offer expires and the alternative becomes much less pleasant." Alone in the suddenly quiet apartment, Caroline sank into a chair, staring at the check on the table. Through the window, snow continued to fall, but the beautiful winter day had turned dark and threatening. When the boys emerged asking for lunch, she smiled and pretended everything was fine. But inside, the old terror was returning, the fear that Eleanor Blackwood's power was too great to fight. By evening, with one desperate phone call, Caroline had made her choice. Nathaniel's hands shook as he read Caroline's note for the 10th time. I'm sorry. Eleanor was right. I'm only bringing trouble to your life. The boys deserve better than a scandal that will follow them forever. Don't look for us. We'll be fine. Remember us with love, not anger. See. The apartment felt hollow. Without their laughter, their scattered toys, their constant beautiful noise. Margaret sat at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. She took nothing but their clothes. Margaret whispered. Left everything you bought them. Even Charlie's new telescope. How long have they been gone? I found the note when I came to make dinner, maybe 3-4 hours. Nathaniel's phone buzzed constantly. Investigators, security teams, anyone who might help track down a woman and 3 children in a city of 8 million. But Caroline had vanished as completely as she had 6 years ago. Thomas is checking bus stations, Nathaniel told Margaret, pacing the empty living room. I've got people at Grand Central, Penn Station, the airports. Mr. Nathaniel. Margaret said quietly. That poor girl was terrified when I left this morning, scared like a rabbit cornered by wolves. My mother. The words came out like a curse. She did something. I know she did. 2 days of searching yielded nothing. Caroline had simply evaporated, taking his sons with her. Nathaniel barely slept, barely ate, driving through neighborhoods where they might hide, checking every shelter and motel within a 100-mile radius. On the morning of the 3rd day, Thomas arrived with a theory. Remember what Caroline told you about her sister in Boston? Sarah something. Sarah Foster. But we don't have a last name, an address. Actually, we might. Thomas pulled out his notes. I've been thinking about what Charlie said during their birthday party. Remember? He mentioned his Aunt Sarah had a funny dog named Pickle. How does that help us? Dog licenses are public record in Massachusetts. I had someone search for registered dogs named Pickle in the Boston area. Thomas smiled grimly. 3 matches. Sarah Foster and Quincy registered a Boston Terrier named Pickle 2 years ago. Hope flared in Nathaniel's chest for the first time in 3 days. An hour later, they were driving north on I-95, Nathaniel's hands gripping the steering wheel as Thomas called ahead to local police. Sarah Foster, 47 Maple Street, Quincy, Thomas, read from his phone. Lives alone with the dog. No husband, no children listed. The house was a small, neat bungalow with a tiny front yard. Nathaniel knocked on the door, his heart hammering against his ribs. A woman in her 30s answered, thin, tired-looking, with Caroline's eyes. Miss Foster? I'm Nathaniel Blackwood. I'm looking for Caroline and 3 little boys. Fear immediately clouded her expression. I don't know any Caroline. Please. Nathaniel's voice cracked. Those boys are my sons. I just want to make sure they're safe. Sarah studied his face for a long moment, then glanced nervously down the street. They were here, she admitted quietly. But they left this morning. Caroline was terrified, talking about someone powerful who would hurt you if she stayed. Where did they go? A motel. The Blue Moon, about 10 miles south on Route 3. But mister? Sarah's voice carried desperate worry. My sister looked like she was running from the devil himself. What kind of trouble is she in? Nathaniel was already running back to the car, Thomas close behind. The kind that ends today. He called over his shoulder. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of a rundown roadside motel. Room 12 had a faded blue door and curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun. Nathaniel knocked gently. Caroline, it's me. Please open the door. Silence. Then the sound of small feet running and Charlie's voice, muffled but excited. Daddy, Daddy's here. The door opened slowly, revealing Caroline's tear-stained face and three little boys who threw themselves into Nathaniel's arms like he was their whole world, which he realized he was. The motel room was cramped and depressing, with faded wallpaper and a broken air conditioner. But as Nathaniel held his sons, breathing in their familiar scent of childhood and innocence, it felt more like home than his penthouse ever had. "We missed you, Daddy," Ethan whispered against his shoulder. Mama cried a lot. Caroline stood in the doorway of the tiny bathroom, her face a mixture of relief and terror. "You shouldn't have come. She'll destroy you if she finds out where we are." "Let me worry about my mother." Nathaniel gently set the boys down, his eyes never leaving Caroline's face. "Why did you run? We talked about this. We're stronger together." "You don't understand what she's capable of." Caroline's voice broke. She had lawyers, witnesses ready to testify that I'm a fraud. She was going to take them away from both of us and make sure I never saw them again. Thomas stepped forward from where he'd been quietly observing. "Caroline, may I see the check she offered you?" Caroline reluctantly retrieved it from her purse. Thomas studied it carefully, then smiled grimly. "She made a mistake. This check is drawn from Eleanor's personal account, not a business account. That means this conversation was about personal vendetta, not protecting company interests." "What does that mean?" Caroline asked. "It means we have leverage," Nathaniel said, understanding immediately. "Thomas, what did you find in those financial records you've been reviewing?" Thomas pulled out a folder he'd been carrying. "Your mother has been creative with company finances. Nothing technically illegal, but several transfers that would raise eyebrows with the SEC. Moving personal expenses through corporate accounts, some questionable charitable deductions. Eleanor values her reputation above everything else," Nathaniel continued. "The threat of public scrutiny would be her worst nightmare." The boys had settled on the shabby motel bed, sharing a bag of chips from the vending machine. Charlie looked up with those thoughtful eyes that reminded everyone so much of his father. "Are we going home soon?" "I don't like it here." "Yes, buddy, we're going home." Nathaniel made his decision. "Thomas, call my mother. Tell her I want to meet at her house in an hour." "Nathaniel, no." Caroline started. "Trust me." He took her hands, feeling how cold they were despite the warm room. "This ends today. I won't let her terrorize you anymore." An hour later, Nathaniel stood in his childhood home's opulent living room, facing the woman who had controlled every aspect of his life for 38 years. Eleanor sat rigidly in her antique chair, dressed as if she were holding court. "You found them quickly," she observed coolly. "I'm impressed. Did you really think you could manipulate me forever?" Nathaniel placed Thomas's folder on the coffee table between them. 15 years of questionable financial transfers. The IRS would find this fascinating reading. Eleanor's composure cracked, slightly. "You're bluffing. Try me." Nathaniel's voice carried the same steel that had built his business empire. "Here's what's going to happen. You will never contact Caroline again. You will never threaten my family. And you will sign documents transferring your company shares to me. And if I refuse, then tomorrow morning these documents go to the Wall Street Journal, the SEC, and the IRS. Your precious reputation will be destroyed, and you'll spend your remaining years fighting federal investigations." Eleanor stared at the folder as if it contained a snake. "You would destroy your own mother? You destroyed 6 years of my life and nearly destroyed the woman I love and my children. This is mercy." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, Eleanor spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was protecting the family legacy. Everything I built." "You built nothing but walls," Nathaniel interrupted. "Caroline and those boys are my legacy now. They're what matters." Eleanor closed her eyes, suddenly looking every one of her 72 years. "What about the children? They're Blackwoods. They deserve to know their heritage. That's not your decision anymore. If they ever want to know their grandmother, it will be on my terms when I'm satisfied you've changed." Thomas stepped forward with legal documents already prepared. "Mrs. Blackwood, if you'll sign here." Eleanor's hand trembled as she signed away her control over the company and her son's life. When she finished, she looked up at Nathaniel with eyes that held something he'd never seen before: respect. "You've become quite formidable," she said quietly. "Perhaps I underestimated what that girl meant to you. Her name is Caroline, and yes, you did." As they prepared to leave, Eleanor spoke one last time. "Nathaniel, the boys, do they know about me? They know they have a grandmother who lives far away. Whether they ever meet her depends entirely on whether you can learn to be the woman they deserve to know." Driving back to the city, Nathaniel felt lighter than he had in years. The shadow that had loomed over his entire life was finally gone. Caroline and the boys were waiting in the motel parking lot, bags packed and ready to come home. "Is it over?" Caroline asked as he embraced her. "It's over. We're free." "Forever and always?" Charlie asked, remembering their conversation from weeks ago. "Forever and always," Nathaniel promised, and for the first time in 6 years, that promise felt unbreakable. The drive back to Manhattan felt like emerging from a long, dark tunnel into sunlight. Caroline sat in the passenger seat, her hand intertwined with Nathaniel's, while the boys chattered excitedly in the back about their adventure and how they couldn't wait to see Margaret and their toys. Was Grandma Eleanor really scary? "Oliver?" asked, his voice carrying innocent curiosity rather than fear. Caroline and Nathaniel exchanged glances. They'd agreed in the motel parking lot to tell the boys the truth, but gently. She was confused about what families should be like, Caroline said carefully. But Daddy helped her understand. "Will we meet her someday?" Charlie asked with that thoughtful expression. "Maybe," Nathaniel replied, "when she learns how to be a better grandma." Back at the penthouse, Margaret was waiting with fresh-baked cookies and tear-filled eyes. She enveloped each boy in fierce hugs, scolding them gently for worrying her while simultaneously thanking God they were safe. "Never again," she declared, looking directly at Caroline. "You're family now, all of you. Family doesn't run from trouble. They face it together." That evening, after the boys had fallen asleep in their own beds, Caroline and Nathaniel sat on his balcony overlooking the twinkling city lights. The same view where he'd stood alone just weeks ago, aching for the family he thought he'd never have. "I'm sorry I ran," Caroline said quietly. "I was so scared of losing them, of her taking them away from both of us, that I couldn't think clearly. You were protecting them the only way you knew how, the same way you've been protecting them for 6 years. Nathaniel turned to face her. "But Caroline, you don't have to carry that weight alone anymore." She leaned against him, finally allowing herself to truly relax for the first time since Eleanor's visit. "What happens now?" "Now we build the life we should have had 6 years ago." Nathaniel pulled out a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "But this time, we do it right." Caroline's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a simple, elegant ring with 3 small stones, sapphires the exact color of their son's eyes. "Caroline Mitchell Foster," he said, dropping to one knee on the balcony, "will you marry me? Not because of legal protections or business arrangements, but because I love you. Because I loved you 6 years ago. I love you now, and I want to love you for the rest of our lives." Through tears of joy, Caroline whispered, "Yes, yes, forever and always." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Oliver's sleepy voice drifted from the doorway. "Are you going to be married like in the princess movies?" "Something like that, buddy," Nathaniel laughed, scooping up his son. "Want to help me plan a wedding? Can we have cake?" Ethan appeared, followed by Charlie. "Lots of cake," Caroline promised, gathering all 3 boys into their arms. Looking out at the city that had brought them together, torn them apart, and finally reunited them, Nathaniel marveled at how complete his life had become. The man who'd thought he had everything had discovered he'd had nothing at all. But now, surrounded by the laughter of his sons and the love of the woman who'd given him the greatest gift imaginable, he truly did have everything. The family he'd dreamed of was finally, permanently, beautifully real. Spring arrived early in New York, bringing with it the sweet promise of new beginnings. The DNA results had arrived weeks ago, a formality that confirmed what everyone already knew in their hearts. The legal documents Thomas had prepared made everything official. Nathaniel Blackwood was legally and irrevocably the father of Oliver, Ethan, and Charlie Foster Blackwood. The boys had adapted to their new school with remarkable resilience. Elite Private Academy had welcomed them warmly, and their teachers marveled at their intelligence and curiosity. Oliver excelled in science, building elaborate volcano models. Ethan discovered a talent for music, his fingers dancing across piano, keys as if he'd been born to play. Charlie, true to his thoughtful nature, became the class's unofficial mediator, helping other children resolve playground disputes. "They're remarkable," Mrs. Patterson, their teacher, told Caroline during a parent conference. "You can see they've overcome challenges, but instead of breaking them, those experiences have made them extraordinarily empathetic." Caroline had bloomed as dramatically as the spring flowers in Central Park. With Nathaniel's encouragement and financial support, she'd returned to art school to complete her degree. Her paintings, vivid, emotional works that captured both struggle and hope, had caught the attention of a small gallery in Soho. Her first exhibition was scheduled for June, right after her graduation. "Look at this one," she told Nathaniel excitedly, showing him her latest canvas. It depicted 3 small figures reaching toward light streaming through dark clouds, their faces turned upward with unmistakable hope. "I call it Finding Home." Nathaniel studied the painting, recognizing himself in the beam of light that seemed to embrace the 3 small figures. "It's perfect, just like its creator." The penthouse had grown too small for their expanding family life. Together, they'd found a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn Heights with a garden where the boys could play, and Caroline could paint in the converted studio space. The house needed work, but that was part of its charm. They would shape it together, making it truly theirs. "I can't believe we're leaving Manhattan," Nathaniel said as he watched movers pack their belongings. "I've lived in the city my entire adult life." "Do you regret it?" Caroline asked, suddenly worried. "Never." He wrapped his arms around her from behind as they watched the boys playing in their soon-to-be former living room. "Home isn't a place, Caroline. It's wherever you and the boys are." Margaret had been beside herself with joy when they'd asked her to move to the new house with them. "Those boys need their grandmother figure," she'd declared, though everyone could see she needed them just as much. Thomas had become more than a lawyer. He was Uncle Thomas now, patiently teaching Oliver chess and letting Ethan help him with legal briefs by drawing pictures on spare paper. His own divorce had been finalized, and watching Nathaniel's transformation had inspired him to seek the happiness he'd forgotten was possible. The wedding planning was simple and joyful. They decided on an intimate ceremony in the garden of their new home, with just close friends and the boys as ring bearers. Caroline had chosen a simple white dress that made her look radiant without being ostentatious. "Can we help pick the flowers?" Charlie asked one afternoon as they planned the ceremony. "Of course. What kind do you think Daddy and I should have?" "Blue ones," all 3 boys said simultaneously, making the adults laugh. "Like our eyes," Oliver explained. "So we're part of the wedding too." The final legal hurdle had been crossed when Nathaniel officially adopted the boys, changing their last names to Blackwood. The ceremony at the courthouse was simple, but when the judge declared it final, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. "You are now, in every sense of the word, a family," the judge had said with a warm smile. That evening, as Caroline tucked the boys into their beds in the new house, each one asked the same question they'd been asking for weeks. "How many more sleeps until the wedding?" "Just 20 more," she answered, kissing each forehead. "And then you'll be our real mama and daddy forever?" Ethan asked. "We already are, sweetheart. The wedding just makes it official for everyone else." Downstairs, Nathaniel stood in the garden, where they'd be married, imagining Caroline walking toward him surrounded by blue flowers chosen by their sons. 6 months ago, he'd been a lonely billionaire convinced he'd never have a family. Now he was a father, a fiancé, and soon-to-be husband to the woman who'd given him everything that truly mattered. The brownstone still needed work. The kitchen faucet leaked, the front steps wobbled, and the garden was overgrown. But as he heard Caroline's laughter floating down from the boys' bedrooms, Nathaniel realized that imperfection had never looked so much like home. The Brooklyn Heights brownstone was still a work in progress when moving day arrived. Boxes crowded the hallways, furniture sat in wrong rooms, and the kitchen faucet continued its persistent drip. But Caroline had never seen anything more beautiful than the afternoon sunlight streaming through their new home's tall windows. "This feels right," she murmured, watching Nathaniel attempt to assemble what the instructions claimed was a bookshelf but looked more like modern art. "Even with my questionable carpentry skills?" He held up two pieces that clearly didn't fit together, especially with your questionable carpentry skills. The boys had claimed their rooms immediately, racing up and down the creaky stairs with Margaret trailing behind, warning them to be careful. Oliver had chosen the room overlooking the garden. Ethan wanted the one nearest the music room they'd planned, and Charlie had picked the smallest room because, as he explained with 6-year-old logic, it feels cozy, like a treehouse. 3 days into the chaos of unpacking, Nathaniel made an announcement at dinner. "Before we get too settled, I want to do something special. All of us together." He led them to the back garden, where a young oak sapling waited in a large pot, its roots carefully wrapped. Beside it lay a small shovel and a wooden box. "This tree is going to grow up with us," Nathaniel explained, kneeling to the boy's eye level. "When you're grown men, it'll be tall and strong, and you'll be able to show your children the tree your family planted when you were 6. Caroline felt tears prick her eyes as she understood the symbolism. Roots, permanence, growth together. "Each of us is going to put something special in the hole before we plant the tree," Nathaniel continued, "something that represents what this family means to us." Margaret had quietly appeared with Thomas, both carrying folding chairs and a thermos of hot chocolate. Word had somehow spread to their new neighbors, who gathered respectfully at the garden's edge, sensing they were witnessing something sacred. Oliver went first, placing a small dinosaur figure in the prepared hole. For all the adventures we're going to have, Ethan added a guitar pick. For the music we'll make together. Charlie, after serious consideration, placed a smooth stone he'd found in Central Park. For being strong together. Caroline's contribution was a small paintbrush from her very first art set, the one she'd had to sell years ago but had replaced when Nathaniel created her studio. For dreams coming true, Nathaniel added an old house key, tarnished with age. For new doors opening when we thought all hope was lost. Margaret stepped forward unexpectedly, holding a small photo wrapped in plastic. "This was my wedding picture with my dear husband George. He would have loved you boys." She placed it gently in the earth, for family that chooses to love each other. Thomas, clearly moved, added his business card, not from his current firm, but a weathered one from his first job as a young lawyer. For believing in new beginnings no matter how old you are. Even Mrs. Chen from next door stepped forward, offering a small jade figurine. "For good fortune in your new home," she said in accented English. As they worked together to plant the oak sapling, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the garden. The tree looked impossibly small in its new spot, but its trunk was straight and its few leaves caught the light like emeralds. "It doesn't look like much now," Charlie observed with his typical honesty. "The best things rarely do at first," Nathaniel replied, pulling all 3 boys into his arms. "But with the right care, love, and time, they become magnificent." As the sun set over Brooklyn Heights, the small crowd gradually dispersed, leaving the family of 5 standing around their newly planted oak. The tree's thin shadow stretched across the garden, already beginning to mark its territory. "When should we have the wedding?" Caroline asked, admiring their handiwork. "Right here," Nathaniel said immediately. "Under our tree. It's perfect. But it's so small. So were we once." He kissed her forehead. "Now look at us." That night, as Caroline checked on the boys, a ritual she'd maintained even in their safest moments, she found them at Charlie's window, looking down at their oak tree, illuminated by the security light. "Do you think it knows we love it?" Oliver whispered. "I think love is what makes things grow," Charlie replied with wisdom beyond his years. Caroline smiled. thinking of how much they'd all grown since that desperate night on the Manhattan sidewalk. Love had indeed been the secret ingredient that transformed a broken family into something beautiful and strong. Tomorrow they would continue unpacking, fixing, and building their life together. But tonight, they were simply a family who had put down roots and planned to grow toward the light. 1 year later, the Brooklyn Heights brownstone hummed with laughter and life. The oak tree, now noticeably taller with a fuller canopy, provided dappled shade over the garden where 7-year-old triplets ran between tables laden with birthday cake and presents. Caroline stood at the kitchen window, watching Nathaniel teach a group of children how to properly blow out birthday candles without spitting on the cake. Her wedding ring caught the afternoon light, the same ring with 3 sapphire stones that had sealed their promise under this very tree 6 months ago. Hard to believe it's been a year, Thomas said, joining her at the window. He looked happier than she'd ever seen him. His own divorce finally behind him and a new relationship blooming with Sarah, Caroline's sister, who'd become a regular visitor. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, sometimes like yesterday. Caroline replied, watching Oliver demonstrate his science fair volcano to fascinated classmates, while Ethan played piano for a small audience of parents. Charlie, ever the thoughtful observer, sat with Mrs. Chen from next door, both of them watching the chaos with identical expressions of amused contentment. Margaret emerged from the pantry carrying her 3rd tray of sandwiches, grumbling good-naturedly about feeding an army, while clearly delighted by the full house. At 75, she'd become the grandmother the boys had never known they needed. The gallery called this morning, Caroline told Thomas quietly. They want to feature 3 more of my paintings in the summer exhibition. The Finding Home series? Yes. Apparently people connect with stories about second chances and chosen families. Through the window they watched Nathaniel catch Ethan mid-leap from the garden wall, spinning him around as the boy shrieked with delight. The transformation in Nathaniel was remarkable, from the lonely billionaire who'd once worked 16-hour days to a man who scheduled business meetings around school plays and soccer practice. Speaking of chosen families, Thomas said carefully, there's someone here who'd like to see the boys. Caroline followed his gaze to the garden gate, where a figure in an elegant lavender dress stood hesitantly, holding a beautifully wrapped gift. Eleanor Blackwood looked older, softer somehow, her usual imperious bearing replaced by something that looked remarkably like nervousness. She's been in therapy, Thomas explained quietly. Nathaniel's been corresponding with her therapist. Apparently, she's made significant progress in understanding how her actions affected everyone. Caroline felt the familiar flutter of protective instinct, but it was tempered by something new, curiosity rather than fear. What does Nathaniel think? He thinks the boys deserve the chance to know their grandmother. If she can prove she's truly changed. Eleanor remained at the gate, clearly invited but unsure of her welcome. Charlie, with his uncanny ability to sense when someone needed kindness, approached her with the directness that only children possess. Are you our grandma? He asked simply. Yes, I suppose I am, Eleanor replied, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. Do you want to see our tree? We planted it together. Daddy says it's going to be huge someday. Caroline watched as her youngest son took Eleanor's hand with complete trust, leading her toward the oak that had become the symbol of their family's growth. Oliver and Ethan, initially wary, were soon showing off their tree-climbing skills while Eleanor listened with what appeared to be genuine interest. She asked specifically not to give gifts, Thomas murmured, said she wanted to earn the right to be part of their lives before offering presents. Nathaniel appeared at Caroline's side, sliding his arms around her waist. What do you think? He asked, nodding toward his mother, who was now sitting on the garden bench listening intently as Charlie explained his rock collection. I think, Caroline said slowly, that people can change if they want to badly enough, and I think those boys have enough love to heal anyone who's genuinely trying to deserve it. As the afternoon wore on, the birthday party took on the easy rhythm of family gatherings. Eleanor helped serve cake, listened to Ethan's piano performance, with tears in her eyes, and admired Oliver's science project with what seemed like authentic interest. When it came time to sing Happy Birthday, she stood slightly apart from the group, but her voice joined the chorus. Later, as guests began to leave and the boys opened their presents, Eleanor approached Caroline privately. "I owe you an apology. That's 6 years overdue," she said quietly. "I was wrong about you. Wrong about what my son needed. Wrong about everything that truly matters." Caroline studied the older woman's face, seeing genuine remorse instead of calculation. "The boys are what matter now. If you can love them without trying to control them, there might be room for you in their lives." "I'd like that chance," Eleanor said simply. "I'd like to learn how to be the grandmother they deserve." As the sun set over Brooklyn Heights, the family gathered under their oak tree for the traditional end-of-birthday party photo. The tree, now substantial enough to provide real shade, seemed to embrace them as they arranged themselves beneath its branches. Nathaniel pulled Carolyn close, their sons clustered around them with chocolate-stained grins and sleepy eyes. Margaret insisted on being in the picture, and Thomas captured the moment with his camera. Even Eleanor was included, standing slightly to one side but unmistakably part of the group. "Look how much our tree has grown," Oliver observed, patting the trunk affectionately. "Just like our family," Caroline said, meeting Nathaniel's eyes across their sons' heads. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, Nathaniel reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here. From that desperate night on a Manhattan sidewalk to this moment of perfect contentment, love had indeed been the force that made everything grow. The man who'd once believed he had everything had discovered that he'd actually had nothing at all. But now, surrounded by the laughter of his sons, the love of his wife, and the promise of new relationships built on genuine affection rather than obligation, he truly did have everything that mattered. Their family tree, both the oak and the raw, human one, was firmly rooted and reaching toward the light, strong enough to weather any storm and beautiful enough to provide shelter for generations to come.